you saw the very best players the entire country has to offer, and you saw it throughout the course of the weekend.
He's growing, he's improving at such a rapid rate. He's going to be a very good player.
This guy's a cross between Sean Marion and Lamar Odom. He's a 6'8" lefty, a high-level athlete, but also got a little bit of point forward skills in him as he can handle and pass the ball extremely well. At this point, they are simply the standard by which everyone else is judged in prep school basketball. He's considering the likes of Michigan, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas.
Welcome back to the Upside Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and this week's guest is Team Takeover CEO Keith Stevens. For those of you who may not know this name, he is one of the most influential people in all of grassroots basketball. If you don't know who he is, it is a damn certainty that the head coach of your favorite college basketball team does. So we've wanted to have Keith on for quite a while, but the timing was particularly important right now because, as we've done on this podcast, we've had a series of episodes on social justice and the issues we're facing as a country right now. And a lot of different people have done a lot of good work. There have been a lot of organizations that came out. On the grassroots side, though, Team Takeover just hosted let me make sure I get this title right, a long talk with Team Takeover. And it was an initiative that was for college coaches only. I was very appreciative of the opportunity to participate, but I believe I was the only non-college coach there. So there were 70 coaches on board, and it was a who's who of high major head coaches. So first and foremost, Keith, thank you for being here.
Not a problem, man. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to ask you about the decision you made to have that program, because you not only invited college coaches, but you made it known that it was important to you and your program for them to take part in it.
Yeah, man, I think the biggest thing was my staff came up with the idea. Like, I won't sit here like I was the brain behind it. Kyle Williams and Doug Martin came up with it. They brought it to me, and I felt that it was something that needed to be done. And luckily, over the years, I've been able to build a reputation that people respected and that people respect, and was able to convince people that this is something that they need to educate themselves, and then also be able to, take from this and educate their kids, in their programs, and not only that, and educate their administration. So I just thought it was important at the time to do something outside of basketball to help to become an influence.
And to put this in perspective, essentially what this was, and I know because, as I said, I was appreciative of the opportunity to participate, but it was a 3-day kind of virtual conference. That's my wording. It was 90 minutes a day for 3 straight days. But before that, there was about 3 hours of pre-work. There was a 2-hour documentary you had to watch. There was a 90-minute, roughly, documentary you had to watch, and then a series of articles, and you had to give feedback. So, and I just wanted to lay that context out, because for people out there, average listener, imagine, we've got head coaches here, and I was writing their names down in it, because it's like this huge Zoom that you're on with some of the most prominent college coaches in the country, over 70 coaches total, including well over 10 high major head coaches. And this is a lot of work that you ask them to do. And it shows, I think some of them did it because they legitimately trying to educate themselves. But I think the reality is some of them did it just because you asked them to.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. But like I told my staff, my biggest thing was, you never know what everybody's mindset is, coming into it. But if we can change somebody's thought process, and give them a clearer understanding on what it's like to be, Black in America. I just think it helps. You know what I mean? 'Cause, one sentence or one article might be the difference in a person who never viewed something a certain way. And like I said, it wasn't about me and my program. It was more about us using our influence to be able to educate people and get them to be willing to listen and have that real conversation that we all know is that can be very uncomfortable, be it black, white, purple, or green.
And you know what? I will say this. I thought of that pre-work. That was the YouTube video. I believe it was, I you know what? I have my phone here, and I took notes on the video and I saved it in my phone, believe it or not, because I thought it was that impactful. So the YouTube video, History of Race in America by Jeffrey Robinson. I thought that was
hands down.
It was incredible. And it's essentially a conference format. And I believe he's a lawyer, right?
Yep, exactly.
And he's going through, and this is like that 90-minute or 2-hour doc, and he's just going through the history of the country. Mm-hmm. And I've finished that, and I'm like, why isn't this a book? You know, like, and why isn't this a book that is taught in every school? Because listen, we've done 6 of these podcasts now, trying to do the same thing. Give people a thread to pull just to educate themselves. Maybe they're well-intentioned people who just don't know, you know, and they get an idea and they get a thread to pull, and it's like, but this one resource, sit down, watch this for 90 minutes. You cannot watch this and come away and not believe that systematic racism isn't just real, but also a tangible thing that you can see generation after generation in this country. So I did want to mention that piece, because I thought that was particularly moving for me. And then just being able to participate for 3 days, you know, you've got people who I think who are trying not to say the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. But I know I learned stuff in there, and Kyle Williams, who was a member of your staff and a director of your staff, was kind enough to talk to me privately afterwards, you know, because I had a question about the material. So it really was a inclusive, very growth-oriented program. I want to put this in perspective too, because I thought the most powerful part, you were quiet through most of it. You didn't run it. You let Kyle do it. Mm-hmm. But at the end, you made what was, I'm going to define as an emotional, it was emotional for me watching you do it. Right. Speech to those coaches, talking about your past and what you've personally been through. And I just, as much as you're comfortable sharing it doesn't have to be the whole thing, but just the overall sentiment of what you want, because these are all guys who know you, respect you, and frankly, who need you. And I think they all learned quite a bit about you from what you said.
I think when we first decided Cal thing was, he was like, Keith, I don't want you to speak early. I want you to speak late. That way we can kind of keep everybody engaged, because if you speak early, they may, you know, phase out of the 3-day phase. I mean, the 3-day project. So as we're going through it, I'm trying to figure out, like, hey, how do I close it? What do I say? And then as you're doing the research on everything, you really start to look at it, and you're like, you know what? If I want to keep them engaged, and, you know, and also educate them, like, because, you know, everyone sees me as this person who has a lot of players, who has influence, you know, in the basketball world, but nobody really knows the story. You know what I mean?
I didn't know the story. I will admit, I didn't know the story.
I felt like, you know, it also shows, like, you can't judge a book by its cover. Mm-hmm. You know, because, you know, in that whole thing, like I said, I was the uncommon denominator. You're talking about 99 coaches on the Zoom at one time, and I was the only person on the whole Zoom that didn't have a college degree. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And coming from the background I came from, of being a single parent, raising a child at 16 years old, while still in college and things, and while still in high school and things, I thought that would be my way to get their attention, and for them to get to know who I really was, and then for them to see how passionate I am about, you know, making change. But then it also led us into the issues that we have out here, you know, in the college basketball world, you know, where Black assistants are just looked at as recruiters.
Right.
And you know, even like we talked about the uncomfortable talk, like a lot of coaches don't put a lot of head coaches don't put their assistant coaches in uncomfortable positions to make them become comfortable there. And that's what you do with your players. And that's the same thing you should do with your coaches to develop them. You know, if you got a guy that's really good, you know, a good recruiter, you know, challenge him to be a better guy at putting together scouts, or challenge him to be a better guy at X's and O's, you know, and then just, you know, the points of, like, one of the points we was talking about, you know, when one of the universities, you know, they have no Black people in power at the whole university.
That was crazy. Those numbers were crazy.
Yeah.
It was one specific school that I mean, you say whatever you want. I won't call them out, but it was like 25 of 26 people, and I mean, it's crazy.
And that, you have to, I felt like I had a platform to be able to point it out and be like, listen, man, like, you have to make change. You can't, that's systematic racism at the highest, any way you want to look at it. You can't tell me there's not black, people, black men or women that's qualified for some of those positions. I'm not even saying it got to be 50-50, but you can't have 1 out of 26 people or persons there, in that position. So, that was my opportunity to be able to challenge those guys to make a change and make a difference and hold their administrations accountable.
Well, that was the part that, of your, and I think you only spoke for, it was 10 minutes or something along those lines, but it was so powerful because you told your story. And as I said, everybody on this call, I don't care who it was. I mean, you've got multiple national championship head coaches on this call. I'm just looking at my list, at least 3 different guys who've won national championships on that call. And the bottom line is, when you said, I need you to be here, they knew that they had to be there. And you're on the call, not only sharing your story and how it may, and how you overcame the odds, at least statistically speaking, that I think they had to look at. But then to tell them, like, because I don't know if this was deliberate on your part, but on day 1, you spoke very briefly and you said, listen, I know everybody on this call is a good person. And then on day 3, you said, kind of continuation on that, it said, we need to hold people accountable. And I don't want to put words in your mouth by any stretch, but it's, it was more or less like, I can't send my kids, who are largely, young men of color, to places where 25 of 26 athletic administrators are white, and every single head coach of every single program is white, because that's a real school. And that's and so I thought that was especially powerful, because it wasn't a threat, it wasn't polarizing in any way, shape, or form. It was just saying, like, hey, understand, if you're adding to this issue of systemic racism, like, I can't support you.
No, it was definitely planned just like that. And it was, here's the reality. Like, at the end of the day, parents are going to make their own decision. And we can't tell a parent or kid where to go. But what I can do is, I can tell them how I feel about a situation or an environment. And I can say, like, hey, you can do it, but I can't support it. And that's kind of what it boils down to. And look, I don't want to see anyone without a job. And I'm not sitting there saying, hey, you need to go in there tomorrow and fire all those people that's in those positions. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, there has to be, you have to show that you're trying to find a way to change with, the way the setup is right now. Whether that's creating some positions for color, to bring some people in that on an advisory board or assistant deans or whatever it may be. You have to change some way, somehow, and you have to add. And if, you can't, and it can't be about $1. Oh, I can't add that position right now, because the reality is, these kids are making you millions and billions of dollars, with TV deals and all this stuff. So why can't you? Like, is it that hard to say, you know what? Maybe we need to create 3 positions in a couple of departments, to where there's a person working side by side with the person that might be white or Irish or Jewish, whatever it may be, creating positions for guys, people of color, to be able to have an influence.
Yeah, that's, when people have asked me about the conference, I'm going to call it the virtual conference, and your message and stuff, I said, you got to understand, Keith was gentle. I mean, everybody, like, a lot of things, like what he's asking for, like, understand this. He didn't say anything about amateurism. Right. He didn't like this is like chapter 1. You know what I mean? It's not, there was nothing polarizing about what he was asking for in the slightest. I mean, it was just this, it should be common sense. It should be human decency. I mean, I was startled by those numbers that some universities have. I mean, it was, and that was part of the pre-work in the conference. It was really, it really took me aback. But so that leads me to another thing I want to talk to you about. You talked about college coaches. Obviously, you work with coaches consistently. How how many alums, coaching alums of the Team Takeover program have gone on, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but roughly how many alums have gone on to coach at the college level?
We definitely have at least 20 plus.
And normally the perception is I'm going to hire one of Keith's guys. And that means, in my mind, if I'm the head coach, I'm going to get one of Keith's players. But that is not how the system should work.
No, what should work is not, for me, it's not how it works. You know, I think over time, if you have a relationship, somebody's going to go because those guys, they know the families and they're going to work. You know what I mean? Like, we've never had a coach go to a school based on a certain player following. It has
no package deals.
No, like when Kenny Johnson went to Indiana, Victor and Maurice Creek was already there.
Yep, Victor Oladipo. Yep, and Kenny was at Towson already, right? Towson was his first job.
And then after that, they didn't get another player, I think, from us until Stan Robinson, which was probably 3 or 4 years later.
But to your point, Kenny became a powerhouse recruiter who got them other people. Yeah.
You know, Adrian Autry went to Virginia Tech as a basketball ops. You know, they didn't get a player. Jeff Allen was already there playing for Seth Greenberg. And when Adrian left, Eric Green came in, and then Adrian went to Syracuse with his associate coach. So it was never, you know, I can't sit here and say, there's never been a guy that got it based on about Keith going there. Now, I won't say names, but there was a coach that hired a coach thinking it was going to happen that way. And when he realized, I was like, listen, man, we don't make kids go to a school. You know, because you hire my guys, because here's how I look at it. I challenge my guys to build relationships with everybody in the grassroots world, be it Under Armour, Adidas, you know, EYBL, whatever, right? And you carry the relationships that I have, and you build on my relationships to make them become your relationships, and that's how you help. That's how you become good in this game. If you look at Adrian Autry at Syracuse, I think they've gotten probably 3 kids out of CIA Bounce program, you know, over the years. But that's because I had a relationship with those guys over 10 years ago, and Red came in and he built on that. You know, so you're not hiring a coach from my program just for a takeover kid. You're hiring it for the relationships and the fact that you know that they're ready to come to that level and be good at what you need them to do.
The network, and I think the other thing too is that your grassroots program is better organized than some college programs. I mean, if you look at the infrastructure and the way that you guys, I mean, you know, you and I have laughed about it in the past, but the I mean, you guys roll deep, you know, I mean, that you know, I mean, and
the reality is those guys, you know, everybody that's getting on that plane has been challenged with a role. You know, be it you might be the driver, you might be the person that's setting up meals, you might be the person that's doing laundry, but you might be in charge of going to scout the game. There's guys that scouting games two games down the road or for the following week games. So you're not just traveling to say, oh, I'm traveling with Team Takeover. You're traveling because there's a responsibility at the highest level. And based on what you say you want to do long term, would it be I want to be an NBA scout, or I want to be a basketball ops guy. That's how we kind of position you in what positions that you're going to be in. Because, you know, if I know you want your job, your goal is to be a basketball operations, adobo, then what I'm going to do is you're going to handle all the administrative stuff. You're going to set up flights. You're going to make sure, you know, we know where we're eating at every night and stuff like that. So, you know, you're going to make sure that all those things are in place and organize us to make sure that that's one less thing the guys that's on the sideline coaching has to do. That's kind of your responsibility, and it got to run the right way.
And so, you know, they're getting on the job training with you, and I think the reasonable expectation is that on the job training continues at the next level, and that it's not, you know, so, and you earlier you raised an obvious point to most, is that the racial profiling of college coaches, you know, the white guys are the X's and O's guys, and the black guys are the recruiters. And that perception is unfortunately rampant, even by some people in the industry. Is that a conversation that you've had like outwardly with people over the years?
I'm pretty blunt. Like, I ask guys, call me, I ask them like, hey, tell me what you're looking for. You're calling you need a coach, I need to know what exactly are you looking for. You looking for somebody to just deliver players from us? I don't have that. Are you looking for someone that has a foundation in certain areas that you can build on? Hey, I got that probably, depending on what you're looking for at the time. But if it's just about a player, like, nah, it doesn't work like that for me.
Right, right. The influence to be able to get these 90 coaches, 10, I don't even know how many head coaches it was. There's been things in the basketball media lately about, who the most powerful people are, who the most influential people are. And it's I have a standard line, as I said, the most powerful people are the names that the mainstream people don't know. Right. Like I said, when I first started this call, I said, some people who maybe listen to this podcast, they may say, Keith Stevens, who's that? But like I said, everybody on their everybody in college basketball knows who they are. And that in and of itself is I think a characteristic of authentic influence. So, beyond the Team Takeover brand, which has been one of the most successful, if not the most successful EYBL programs since Nike formed the league. But your scope extends far beyond that. And you're the last person to toot your own horn. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to say how you've built your network, and then maybe I'll add to it depending on how how candid you are. But I mean, how have you positioned yourself or developed that network and to have the influence that you have in the basketball landscape?
I think the first thing was developing myself to be able to deal with these people, in this world, and getting them to trust my word by basically, just because you play for me, it's not like I'm not going to sacrifice my character or who I am just to get a kid a scholarship, because you watch over the years where people are lying to these coaches. Oh no, he's going to be this or he's going to be that. And then when they get there, he don't become that. And then that kid ends up in the transfer portal. So one of them is just being honest, guys, be it from the NBA guys that call now when they're going through draft process, or college guys, head coaches call and say, hey, Keith, what's your real opinion? Like, give them the real opinion. At the end of the day, the kid can find a school, but I want to make sure those kids are in the right situation. Two, I think everybody knows that the same way I challenge my players and I challenge referees is the same way I challenge my coaches. I challenge them. That's, what I mean? I challenge them to develop relationships, real tough conversations. Like when Brendan Strong, who's at St. Joe's, and Tony Skinn, who's at Seton Hall, both came to me. Like, one of the things I told them is like, hey, young guys, like, y'all have to cut your dreads off. And they look at me like, hey, it took me years to grow these. I'm like, listen, if you want to go into that world, this is one of the things you got to do. And they both did it. And, you see where they are now because of it, but they listen. So I
didn't know Brendan had dreads.
Oh, yes, he did. Yeah. I will send you a picture. So, having to challenge them. Like, and I think that's the biggest thing is like challenging them and helping to mold them, into what they can become. And then I think lastly, it's like we develop the players and we hold them accountable, and, and everybody knows it's discipline. Like, you never see our kids get technical fouls or walking in the gym with hoods on their heads or their pants hanging down. And I think for coaches at the highest levels, you respect that because, that's the culture you want for your program.
Yeah.
And just knowing that we're not a program that I think everybody knows, like we've never had a dirty recruitment process, or we've never been involved in anything like that. They know if you recruit that kid, you're recruiting a family and a kid that come from a good background.
No, there's a legitimate business organization behind your program. I also want to ask you about mentoring, because I know that that's something that you've invested a lot of time in. You mentioned it earlier with regard to Syracuse being able to recruit CAA bounce based on relationships that were ultimately kind of 1 degree of separation off your own. But is that why and how are you so invested in mentoring other? I don't even know the scope of the people you mentor. I know you mentor people, former players, and I know you mentor other grassroots directors. But why is that something you're so passionate about?
I mean, I think it's more so legacy. You know what I mean? And knowing where you heard the story, knowing where I came from, and to know that over the years, I've been able to create a reputation of people of quality character for what it's worth, to an extent, and where people trust what I say. So to know that, always say to people, like, when I leave here, I want people to be able to sit back and talk about how many people I helped. You know what I mean? And it becomes an extension. Like, if I help, it might be a 1-off or a 2-off or a 3-off. You know what I mean? Like, if I help Ashley Howard to develop as a coach and do this, and as a man, then he goes and helps somebody else. And he's telling that person, hey, man, when I talked to Keith Stevens X amount of years ago, he showed me this right here, and they're building on it. And that just grows your legacy. And I think that's been the most important part for me, is like, a person with minimal education, just a high school graduate, but who's been able to be, still be successful in this. How do you continue to grow your legacy and be impact and serve in an impactful way, from not just in your community, but in as many communities as possible to touch?
Well, because there's so many different components to it. There's the players you have and the legacy you have in terms of winning games, developing college players. There's the guys you've sent out, coaches out of your program. There's the players you mentor. But it's also in my mind an incredible case study in business development, because I think most of the guys who come in, and everybody calls this a business, and it really is. But lots of times the financial parts of it are parts that people can't talk about, or there's a unlawfulness about it. Sometimes the rules and the ethics of it don't always align. But the way in which you've built your business, and I admittedly don't know the full scope of it, but just on the grassroots side, it has been one of the best case studies in business development that I've seen on so many different levels, from the events to the teams, to the way in which you coach your young teams. And so I was wondering if you could take a minute just to talk about the vision of the business.
So for me, the vision was always the relationships, and I tried to surround myself, with board members and friends that could continuously teach me, so you find people that's been successful in business, and you attach yourself to them to learn, and learning doesn't always mean they're going to do everything right. I learn sometimes from what people do wrong. Make sure I don't do it. And I can say that I'm going to be perfect at everything I do, because, there's no risk, no reward sometimes. But it's a constant, I think it's the ability to network with relationships and learn, and you got to always be willing to learn, like for me. So you start off with a $50,000 Nike contract, and you grow it. And it's like, my mindset was always, if Nike came tomorrow, or when Reebok was there, if one of them was to come tomorrow and say, hey, we're not giving you this check no more, can you still sustain? So it was always like, hey, I know this is coming, but act like it's not there, and go find other ways and resources to fundraise and create relationships in the community where people will want to be a part of something special that's helping kids, and also helping young men who wants to go into coaching and things like that. So a lot of it was a networking and the thought process of being outside the box, and not just depending on a shoe company to make everything happen for us.
I want to end this discussion where we started it, and that is, on the issues of social justice and racial inequality. I know there's so much to hear, but are there very tangible things? We talked about athletic staff within college coaching. What are the most specific? Well, let me not assume that there is a list of the most specific or most immediate changes that we need to see, either in college basketball or in the recruiting world. But are there things that you view as the most immediate priorities that need to change in our little corner of basketball, whether that's grassroots or college basketball?
I think it's a couple of things. Like, one, and most of my stuff is, I said this on that call, is like the 10-7 rule has been an issue for me.
Now, let's assume people don't know, the people listening don't know. Can you explain what the 10-7 rule is?
Basically, the 10-7 rule is, by your senior year, your core, you have basically 2, 4, 6 semesters to get 10 core classes.
So it's like academic benchmarks you have to hit along the way, and if you don't hit them, you're already out.
Exactly, because you can't go back and change those grades like once upon a time you could. And like I said, it's nothing but, for me, I look at it as modern day Prop 48 from back in the late 80s. And the people that it's constantly affecting is the people of color.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and understand, like, if you come from, and this is not even in my community really, I mean, from my program, I should say, because my kids come out of really, really good private schools. You know, they got an academic foundation, but there's a lot of kids in this community that don't have the same opportunities, and you watch them as they grow, and then they get to 12th grade, and you're like, yo, that kid had a really good year. He should be able to go Division I. And then you look at the transcript, and he can't go because they've locked him in. And knowing that your home foundation and your home environment carries over to your academic piece. And if you, at 14, 15 years old, you're still very, very immature as a person. You know, and like all of us, we change as we realize the importance of our future. And those kids, when they realize it at 15 or 16, then they can't go back and anything about it. And I just think it's fair to penalize a kid who, you never know what that kid was going through in 9th or 10th grade. You know, you got kids that are homeless, or mom and dad might be on drugs, or, you know, a sibling could have been shot. Anything could have happened, you know, and that kid is penalized because of immaturity. Like, people grow up at 14, you still don't know what the hell you're doing at that point. Really.
Right. And for Adam Finkelstein, I'm going home to my mom and dad when I'm 14 years old, and they're going to straighten me out. But to your point, for that's not necessarily the case for the kids who are not hitting those benchmarks early on. So that was, and to be honest with you, that's a point that I haven't seen articulated very often. And as soon as you said that, I said, that makes complete sense.
And that the biggest word in is the maturity. Like, where are you at mature-wise at that stage in your life? Because a lot of kids, you know, let's say you get a kid transferring from public school in 8th grade, and let's say Archbishop Malloy said the kid is really good, I'm gonna bring him here. You know, and they get him in, but that kid don't have the academic foundation.
Right.
And it takes time to get them where you want to get them to, but can't make up the classes, then what? You know, that kid is stuck. You know, the other thing is, you know, people are now talking about wanting to have the SAT and ACT waive, you know, but it all works side by side. Like, you can waive the SAT and the ACT and SAT, but if the 10-7 rule don't change, it's not going to matter anyway, because you still won't meet your core requirements. So
I heard a good one the other day. And this may not be correct, but somebody told me this the other day, that the Ivy Leagues are not requiring standardized tests anymore, unless you're an athlete who needs to fit into their academic index score. Now, so don't quote me on that before I get, attacked on Twitter, but that's and someone said to that, they said, you don't think there's racial undertones in that? And I was like, God, I hope that's not true.
I hope they're not, because that would be crazy to during these times with something like that.
Yeah, that would.
And overall, like, we have to give everybody the best we can. We got to try to give everybody an even playing field, you know, and understanding where people are coming from. We had a kid, I won't say his name, but is going to a great school right now, and you know, he didn't test well. You know, he wasn't supposed to go to the high school he was supposed to go to, and end up going to a Power 5 school in a Big Ten and stuff like that. But that kid was smart as hell. He just didn't test well. You know, fortunately, that school gave him the opportunity. He ended up being a 4.0 all the way through that, one of the best schools in Washington, D.C.
Is there anything else other that really needs to, that you think college basketball or the grassroots world really needs to address right off the bat?
I mean, I just think, like, stop. I guess for me, it's like the quota. Like I said, I just hate people saying, "Oh, I got to hire a white guy because I got two black. I got to hire a black guy because I got two whites." Man, I just think it has to be, you got to hire the best staff.
That's how I got in. That's how I got into the business. That's it, because and I love him. But he needed a white guy.
Yeah. And
that's how I got in. Because there wasn't a white guy on the staff, and that was But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's real. Like those guys, and then it's just like I said on the call. Like you can't tell me, this is a majority in college basketball, is majority black. Let's be real.
Mm-hmm. The players, yep.
And you can't tell me these players are good enough to make billions of dollars for the NCAA and these universities, but they're not good enough to become head coaches one day at the highest levels. Not not in the HBCU, not in the NEC, but you can't tell me these guys aren't good enough and educated and qualified enough to be coaches at the Power 5 level as head coaches. It's just we got to do a better job of giving them opportunities, but then we also got to do a better job of developing these guys to make sure they're ready when it happens.
And I think that goes across the board. Like, even if you don't want to be a coach, like, it's not enough to get your guys, like, have them go see the academic advisor. So, and this is not race specific in any way, shape, or form, but like, it's not enough for your kids to be eligible. They've got to be able to get and hold a job when they're done. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice to your players. I remember, so many times it's like you see coaches and it's all about just getting them eligible. And I times, even from my coaching past, to be like, how's this person going to be able to hold a job when they're done? Like, we're not doing right by them. Like, that's, so whether they're a coach or not, and it goes back to what you said earlier about, you hire somebody because you want to get a player. I got to get in the box there, get a player. But like, what are you doing to prepare them to be a head coach? If they're not ready to do, if they're not ready to do the X's and the O's at that point, well, then it's on you to prepare them to do that. Otherwise, you're doing them a disservice, and you're just part of the, you're just another, spoke in the same systemic wheel.
Yeah, then you get those guys calling and they're complaining, and they're afraid to have those real conversations with their bosses because of what could possibly, tarnish the relationship or have the guy question if he's the right person for the staff, which isn't fair also. You should be able to have those real conversations and be able to find a median and how to make it work. And I just think those guys, because a lot of them make so much money, it's like, I don't want to rock the boat, but the reality is your boat will sink at some point if you don't keep your mind and get yourself in the right situations.
And develop your guys, whether it's your coaches or your players. I thank you for doing this. I commend you for using your influence and basically, these are my words, but more or less putting those guys on notice that they need to start to be. And you did it in such, again, I don't know if this was deliberate, but the way in which you kind of disarmed everybody initially, like, it was so good. It was like, I know everybody's good people, but you better be on the right side of this, 3 days. And it was, and that, I just thought that was the message was perfect.
I just felt it was needed. And like I said, I felt that I was blessed with a platform and an ability to get people to listen. So, let's try. I just wanted to see if I can touch as many people as possible and try to help, educate them. And to be honest, as a black man, like, I became educated even more so to things that we were up against in the past. You know what I mean? And it helped me to be able to sit down with my kids and talk to them about it and educate them. So I think it was good all the way around the board.
The history, the video we mentioned earlier, I know there were black coaches on that call who didn't know all the history behind it. And I remember they were saying, and not to say that I did, this is,
right,
just starting to, there were certain, like I said, I got the notes on my phone because I was learning from it too, but it was a great opportunity. Your guys did a terrific job. And as I said, your influence in this business is one of a kind, and it speaks to the so many different things you've done in your organization and done it at the highest level, not just from winning on the court and developing players, but developing coaches, building a business model, mentoring other people in the space. And to see you extend that to really utilize that platform to try and make some positive changes in this all important area was really special. So I thank you. I know you don't like the attention in the interview, so I thank you for doing this.
Oh, good.
and just commend you for using your influence the way you have.
Nah, man, thanks again for having me, and I enjoyed it.